Alright, just got in the truck. We're heading out of leaving Hilton Head. Great stay over at the resort there, the National Resort. A handful of days, but we're heading down to the Savannah area and staying at State Park nearby. So, Skidaway Island campground, or State Park campground. Looks pretty cool. Hopping out. That's nice. But yeah, never been here before. Yeah, 35 cents a kilowatt hour. It's about the same price. 10 kilowatts. About the same price of supercharger, give or take. Hey, welcome back everyone. Thanks for joining. I got a new video here to put together. We're still in Georgia, but the most recent stop we enjoyed was Skidaway Island State Park. It's a 588-acre state park located on the Barrier Island, just about 20 minutes south of historic Savannah, Georgia. It borders Skidaway Narrows with a mix of maritime forests, salt marshes, and scenic waterways. The campground itself was fairly shaded. It hosts 87 sites under live oaks with Spanish moss everywhere. Just absolutely every tree was covered. Really pretty to look at. Good for RVs, of course, and then there were some tent campers. It's good for tent sites. And we had, you get picnic tables. Most of these state parks are pretty consistent. Picnic tables and fire rings. And we had a 50 amp electric and water. So we didn't have any sewer. And I believe there's a handful of full hookups. But a lot of times, not a huge deal for us. If we can only get into, I think electric's probably most important, because you can fill up your tanks and go to the dump station when you leave, or things like that. So we had 50 amp service with water, and the campground itself was pretty wooded overall. And I guess that's a good thing in Georgia. I'm sure the summers here can get pretty hot, so the shade is probably much welcomed. We had kind of a low-key stay. I mean, the campground itself was pretty quiet. Not a whole lot of crazy actions. Some bike riding and so forth, but everybody was fairly quiet and respectable. Decent sized sites though, and our site was actually a pull through, and I think most of them appear to be pull through, and sometimes pull through sites are a little bit different than you expect at a large resort, right? So they're pull through because there's an entrance and an exit, but ultimately some of them are curved and they go around a corner. You kind of loop around a tree and you just have enough to kind of pull in and pull out, but they're still convenient. These roads here are fairly narrow, and the funny thing about this place is the tree roots on the road itself were just popping up the asphalt everywhere. Some of it was pretty gnarly, almost kind of like a whoop section in a motocross or a supercross track, but the roots run a little loose there, that's for sure. But so when we get there, we jumped on bikes right away, and we try to do that when we can, because we want to kind of get a good look at the campsite or the campground itself, and then the park and whatever we can. But safe bike riding. There were some trails with alligator warning signs that we didn't really partake in, but just being able to cruise through the campground, especially with my son being younger and being on the asphalt, I think is very convenient for us. But it was shaded. This park's not super busy, at least this time of year in September, and we were able to just kind of cruise around the park and still have a pretty good bike ride, and it was nice. It's nice when you can get the bikes out. And they have a brand new, it wasn't brand new, it was a new shower house, a couple of them. Not brand new, but fairly nice. I think they were decent enough. I mean, I checked them out a couple times. Hot water is probably one of the most important criteria with the shower house and being clean. They are not the worst we've seen, but they're definitely a little bit older. And I think they, a couple of different sections, they had family style showers on one, where essentially you go in and it's all private, and you have access to the shower itself, the toilet and sink, and the door locks behind you, which I think is most people enjoy more just because of the sheer privacy. And then they had a couple other, like the men's and the women's, that had separate stalls. Not a big deal. I checked those out too with separate doors. And but never very busy, not at least when we were there. These shower houses weren't super occupied, which is nice. So I mentioned earlier that the Spanish moss being everywhere at this park. wooded. It feels like you're kind of in a jungle when you pull in. It's pretty awesome, especially from where we're from. I think just the trees here are so large and sprawling. It's super impressive. It's something just really cool to look at. We really like that. And then, of course, with state parks, they offer playgrounds for the kids, or I guess some of the adults if you wish. We saw 2 playgrounds, and one being a little bit older, I would say, for older kids, and the other one being for the younger ones over towards the check-in center and the admin offices. And then they actually had a workout area where you had some different exercise equipment we were able to check out and spend a little bit of time on that. And of course, there's other things to do. So I say this kind of over and over, but even with state parks, even if you don't own an RV or you're not interested in taking a tent, there's always something usually where you can rent. They had cabins for rent. These cabins, I didn't go inside of them, but they kind of look like what I describe as a park model trailer. Small, 300-400 square foot cabin, probably with a loft. And then they had at least 2 yurts for rent around the corner we had seen. So the yurts being kind of more of a permanent tent set up, and they were right next to one of the shower house locations as well. And this is just kind of most state parks we run into wildlife. This was no exception. We saw, they had a bunch of small 2 to 3 inch light colored lizards running around you would see off the sidewalks and off the road and so forth. I might have got a little video of them or not. A bunch of those. I never saw anything really larger than 2 or 3 inches with that. But this park, we saw deer everywhere. The deer, and most state parks, the deer are pretty out in the open. I think just because they're safe and there's not hunters and so forth. But here, I mean, deer everywhere. And there was a mom and babies, and they were running around. There was a buck that showed up, and they were just hanging out. I mean, you could be pretty close to them, and they weren't scared at all. And I'm sure you could scare them away if you tried, but they were just keep an eye on you. But they were absolutely everywhere. White-tailed deer, so many different deer, very friendly. Like I said, there was a little bit of everything in different age groups, but it was really cool. We tried to get us some video, but it seemed like every time we'd go out, we'd leave the camper, there's a deer like across the street and 10, 20 foot away, and then another one, and the mom, and then obviously the youngins and so forth running over. But super cool. We'd never seen so many deer before we started traveling these state parks, the amount of deer, white-tailed deer we see. And then, of course, as I mentioned, when you check in, at the beginning, they have this registration office, but it's also where their camp store is. And they have a little nature center. I'll get to that here in a minute. But a lot of merchandise. They had a lot of souvenirs. And I'm seeing that kind of further south we get. Myrtle Beach was definitely one that jumped out about souvenirs. But these state parks, even here in Georgia, they just have a lot of different merchandise for their local state park, and a lot of inventory, it seemed, too. And then every state park always has an amphitheater. I don't know. I need to look up on that why it's such a staple. I mean, I guess back in the day, pre-technology, if you wanted to go see a movie and they had some kind of projector, it was pretty cool. But now everything's streaming and so forth if you have internet. But they always have an amphitheater. Nothing was going on, at least when we were there. But they did have one, so it made the cut. Ran out to here in the Savannah area. They've got a Whole Foods, probably the biggest, at least from the outside. It looks like the biggest Whole Foods I've ever seen. But we try to get groceries when we can. Some of the places we stay are very remote, and you're limited to gas station groceries. So we try to stock up when we're in somewhat of a civilization or a civilized sized town like Savannah. Of course, has plenty of grocery stores, but do a call ahead order, and they'll bring it out usually to the truck and get stocked up before the next trip. Because I think our next spot, there's not a whole lot around, so we were pleasantly surprised to be able to get a Whole Foods order in while we were here in the Savannah area. Man, my wife ordered so much. Check all this out. But we don't always see grocery stores, so gotta stock up when we can. And then we looked up some things to do nearby, because where we're at, we're just about 20 minutes from Savannah, but there's some other stuff going around that, number one, my wife and I, we had no idea. But they have Fort Pulaski, just a short drive. I don't think it was 20 minutes away. Fort Pulaski is located on Cockspur Island, Georgia, of course, and was built between 1829 and 1847 to protect the port of Savannah. This is a national fort, of course, so we are able to get in. We have an American the Beautiful pass that gets us into the national parks, and I want to say it was 100 or 104, 150 bucks, I think, for the year. I forget what it is, but if you go to like two or three different locations for the year, it pays for itself. And of course, we've already done that. But this is another place you get in with the American the Beautiful pass. But the fort's named after Casimir Pulaski, evidently a Polish hero of the American Revolutionary War. And then during the Civil War, Fort Pulaski was captured by Union forces in 1862. This is, obviously got a lot of history here. It's pretty cool. There's all kind of stuff to do. When we first got there, we got there a little late in the day and went inside the store and kind of the little mini museum, and they sent us over to the fort. And you walk over to the fort, and it's massive. I mean, it's super impressive, and it's got drawbridges and moats, and it's just, I don't know, it's awesome. You definitely need to swing by if you're anywhere close to the Savannah area or over here at this campground. You need to head over to Fort Pulaski. So Fort Pulaski was constructed with over some of the other fun facts we saw. 25 million bricks, like I said, a moat drawbridge, massive masonry walls up to 11 foot thick, and it was evidently designated as a national monument way back in 1924. And it even served as a prison for Confederate soldiers after the capture by Union forces. And then today, of course, Fort Pulaski is a popular historic site. They do tours. Evidently they do reenactments there as well. Not while we were there, but that'd be pretty cool to see too. And then another place, so after we left Fort Pulaski, where we're at on these coasts, there's just islands everywhere. Different things on different islands, obviously connected by bridge or causeway or somewhat of a combination. And it's like we might have a big military helicopter coming in behind me. We'll see how the audio goes. But so after we left Fort Pulaski, that was on an island, we headed over. I'll let this one pass. It's pretty sweet though. So after Fort Pulaski, we left and headed over to Tybee Island, T-Y-B-E-E, Tybee. A pretty cool name. I looked it up, but Tybee means salt, and evidently a Native American language because of the island's salty marshes. Once again, they obviously have old lighthouses, and it has some history of being a pirate hangout way back in the 1700s. They used to use it to hide their treasure, evidently. And there's some old wives' tale that there's some buried treasure still around there. People come out there and hunt for. But pretty cool. I think this is a fun little area, and maybe you guys know about Tybee Island, but it's not touristy, but it's still a kind of a vacation spot, if that makes sense. Once again, we're there in September, so this is what you would call the shoulder season, but it had a small town vibe, small town kind of towny vibe, if you will. Golf carts running around everywhere, bicycles, and then we stopped by, grabbed some ice cream. Was kind of the whole trip over there, which is pretty cool little spot. They have a few different things. They got some of that stuff. We had ice cream and candy stores, but nothing like a major touristy vacation city. I would say everything was a lot more low key. And then we checked out the North Beach, kind of looked that up about some of the more popular beaches. And then they have a public beach right there by where we got ice cream. But the North Beach seemed to have better ratings. And I think it's more of a local kind of a hangout. But nice beach. Wasn't too busy by any means. We entered from the Golick Street right when you come in. And the beach was semi-populated, I would say. But it was cool. We went out there. It's pretty long. A lot of people hanging out. They had some people fishing, of course. I tried to get a little bit of video. We actually, speaking of the helicopter, we had a Black Hawk fly by over at Tybee. Which was really cool. And then, of course, you got your pelicans flying around, people feeding the seagulls, all that good stuff. And then right behind the beach, where we would head over, where we parked actually, there was a restaurant right on North Beach, which was pretty cool. You kind of enter from the parking lot, so we checked that out and got dinner. Cool vibe, ocean winds were coming off. Just very relaxed setting. I recommend checking out Tybee Island, even if you're not camping or staying where we are. It seems like they had a lot going on and places to stay and cottages and things to rent. Pretty neat. And then, of course, when we were in this area of Skidaway Island, we knew we would be nearby Savannah, especially the historic district, that we wanted to go check out. So we headed over there, I think it was like a Thursday afternoon, to go downtown historic Savannah, and kind of drove through a park district, and then we wanted to go down by the river walk, which was pretty famous. So the Savannah Historic District, for those who don't know, it does have like a cobblestone history. That's part of what you see in some of these photos and videos. But the cobblestones on River Street were originally ballast stones from ships way back in the 17 and 1800s, and then they brought from Europe and actually reused to pave the streets. And then once again, this area was definitely a pirate hotspot. Was once a hangout for pirates and sailors. Old taverns like the Pirate's House opened in 1753. Evidently, this is still in business. Pretty cool. And then with a lot of older towns, they talked about at least some of the stuff I looked up, the ghostly vibes. The cobblestone area is said to be haunted with old buildings like 1790 Inn hosting ghost stories and sailors. And actually, I don't know if I got any video of it, but when we were leaving Savannah, there was a ghost tour, and a guy had converted a hearse into like a stadium seating. It was pretty cool. It was like he might need some stiffer springs in the rear, but it was pretty cool. He had a whole group with him. He was touring around. So we did a walkthrough. That was all we were kind of expecting to do. They had some different public parking. We ended up parking up on a top of a parking garage and then walking over a few blocks. They have restaurants. They had candy stores, ice creams, and then of course all kinds of different bars. I would say not so much at least where we were at. Maybe we were in the wrong spot, but not so much a kid spot after dark. They had some street vendors, running around trying to hustle, and but super cool history. I think it's something to check out, and I think with the cobblestone and everything, some of these old buildings, and then they had a couple hotels right there on the water that you can kind of look over the street. But probably a pretty hopping spot after hours, more for adult fun. But yeah, back to Skidaway Island. We did take advantage of the laundry there. They had a laundry facility, I think they had 2 washers and dryers in 2 different buildings that I found. There might have been a third building on the other side that I didn't peek my head in, so there might have been 3, but not bad. I think there was $250 a load, $250 to wash, $250 to dry. And then we wanted to check out, I mentioned earlier that they had a nature center. So back up at the front, the registration office / camp store, to the one wing off the right of the nature, they had this essentially a nature center. Pretty cool. This whole building up front seems really new. I mean, especially to the campground, the whole front building seems really new and nice. I bet it's not 5 years old, just guesstimating. But the wing to the right was the nature center, and it had different aquariums. They had some turtles and some fish. They had a handful of different types of snakes from the area. And then they had this really cool giant sloth exhibit, native giant sloth exhibit. So they've got a nature center off here from the front main camp store. Has it looks like this whole building's fairly new, and different things. Not a ton, but they do have a few aquariums and a few snakes. Something to look at. Pretty cool. They've got a huge giant ground sloth of Skidaway. Evidently, they used to hammer these parts. Pretty cool, but nice, clean building. They've got a huge. I say huge. A lot of their camp stores is that. It's a store with merchandise for sale, a few snacks, a lot of merchandise. Overall, Skidaway Island, I would say I would definitely come back. It's definitely a nice park, friendly staff, well taken care of. The other thing about Skidaway Island is it seems to be in a pretty nice area. There's a golf course right there. It seems like some country club vibes. There's a lot of gated communities around there. So when you go over the bridge to get into the island, the area seems really nice too. And there's a Publix and then a Kroger right there and some other stuff you can shop. And obviously you're not too far from Savannah, from some other civilization with grocery stores and things like that. But we had a good time. Skidaway Island is up on the list, that's for sure. But up next, we head to Jekyll Island State Park here in Georgia. That's actually where I am right now. And I don't want to play spoiler, but this is Jekyll Island had quickly jumped to the top of our list, especially for state parks to stay. This place is fantastic. It's a whole island that's a state park that was essentially bought by Georgia back in the, I think in the 40s, late 30s, early mid 40s. And there's residences here and historic houses and cottages, and this place has a little bit of everything and places to stay even if you're not camping. So stay tuned for that one. I'm working on that soon. I assume it's going to be a little bit longer because we're here for about 6 days and there is so much going on, way more than we thought. We knew that there was a campground here, Arizona Island. It was on our way south. Well, we booked it a couple months back, but fantastic place. This one has moved to the top of our list without any question, and I can't wait to get that out. We'll see it soon, and thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.